Fed has struck down multiple of Donald Trump's tariffs, ruling that he overstepped his authority by using emergency powers to impose them. The judges say the Constitution grants Congress, not the President, the power to levy taxes and tariffs. Now, while the ruling curbs Trump's use of International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the tariffs, however, remain in effect until the mid of October, giving time for an appeal in the Supreme Court, which Donald Trump says that he will eventually win in the end. Now, reacting sharply, Donald Trump has called the judges to be as highly partisan and has stressed that all of the tariffs still continue to remain in effect. When it comes to all of the warning that he seems to be issuing, however, let's put it in focus exactly if he can actually term it as a setback to Donald Trump and his administration, because he's been issuing a warning saying that tariffs are a measure when it comes to making America rich, strong and powerful again. But exactly what does the messaging that go across? Is it when it comes to Donald Trump, will he swallow his pride? Because this seems to be a legal showdown over tariffs, and the U.S. court has suggested and said that multiple tariffs that has been imposed by the president and his administration are actually illegal. This is what the court has to say. This is the U.S. Appeals Court, which has now said that most Trump tariffs are actually not legal. The tariffs that has been imposed are actually an overstep of president's authority and his power. What the law actually says that it bars the president from imposing tariffs and taxes. Imposing tariffs actually, when it comes to the power, who can do so? It's not the president, but it is the U.S. Congress. But what has now been suggested, if this is actually a setback to Donald Trump, because he seems to be now taking this challenge head on, saying that this verdict that would be appealed in the Supreme Court, and according to him, eventually he will win. Let's introduce our guests also joining us here on the broadcast, Mr. Suresh Kumar Goel, who is a former diplomat. Good afternoon to you, sir. And Vijay Sardana, who is a senior economist, also joining us here on the broadcast. Good afternoon to you as well. But I would like to go across to my colleague Srinjoy first, because Srinjoy, as these days, tariff tantrum of Donald Trump has been grabbing headlines, but what does it come across as far as in own courts? In the U.S., the appeals court has now been coming out with a verdict suggesting that all of the tariffs that has been imposed by the Trump administration are actually not valid.
It now depends on the 9 men and women who are in the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has a rightward tilt at this point, and it also has to be kept in mind that the president himself, in his previous tenure, had appointed several of those judges. Now, of course, the Supreme Court will look at the whole issue and take a decision. Now, the entire structure of the Trump administration, the Trump government, these last 200 days plus, actually depends on tariffs. If the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs and goes with the junior court's point of view, then President Trump will be cornered. But, of course, we don't know what the Supreme Court will do. We don't know how it will look at the whole issue. We don't know as yet. But the point to be made is that there is a growing resentment within the United States, and it could well get worse, because anybody with any knowledge of economics will tell you that if you have high tariffs and if they are transferred onto the consumer, there is bound to be inflation.
Well, let's get that expert opinion from Mr. Sardana himself, because as far as higher inflation is now being suggested, Donald Trump is of the opinion, Mr. Sardana, that trade deficit with multiple countries is actually costing the American taxpayers, who have been suffering for years when it comes to multiple countries who he believes have been playing a dominant role over the United States. But if the situation is to go back when it comes to the pre-tariff days, how much would it actually affect the American economy, and of course when it comes to the stature of the President of the United States himself?
See, the ruling by federal court is very interesting. They have raised certain constitutional issues which we should appreciate. First of all, Article 1 of Constitution says that putting taxes is a jurisdiction of Congress, not the president. So I don't think the Supreme Court will overrule this judgment. That is one aspect. Second, about $200+ billion US government has collected so far in the name of tariff since the President Trump has come to power. That has to be refunded now if this ruling goes out of practice. Third important issue is that inflation is generally a local phenomena or when you are importing at high price. Imposing tariff is going to add to inflation, it is not going to reduce it. And most important observation of the court is that you started imposing tariff because you are saying there is a drug influx into the country. We want to penalize Mexico, Canada, these countries, neighboring countries, and China, because they are exporting drugs to America. But tariffs are not going to control the drugs. You have to take other measures.
But pharmaceuticals, as we speak of this industry, for now that has been exempted from, when it comes to Donald Trump's tariff imposition. But we'll also take up the question, is that why that Donald Trump is going, significantly soft on an adversary like China, and why India, in the meantime, is being singled out and targeted. But we'll just play out other factors that could be building up to possible scenarios. What happens if the Supreme Court of the United States actually scraps Trump's tariffs, holding it as invalid? Because this would come across as a significant blow to the US judiciary and the Treasury, rather. And when we speak of the United States, it could rather be forced to refund billions in duties, what it has been holding and has been charging multiple nations. Now, when we talk about the revenue collection that has happened till July from the tariffs that has been existing in the trade structure, could be affected. About $159 billion US may be affected, and the US may also lose an upper hand when it comes to the tariff negotiations. It could also possibly hinder future tariff imposition, and there is still volatility and uncertainty that continues when it comes to the financial markets. So let's go back now, and Mr. Goel, what is your understanding and reading of the situation? Do you call it as a setback to Donald Trump, because he says he's ready to challenge it in the Supreme Court, and the imposition when it comes to this verdict, however, he still has time till the mid of October?
I'm not going to go into the legal issues here because that is for the Supreme Court to really work on now and as President Trump has said that he will go into appeal in any case and let the court decide on how and whether that decision of federal court can be reversed or not. But yes, in a sense, we are seeing a lot of turmoil in the whole administrative structure, not the setup really, not the people, which is taking place in any case, but even in terms of the functioning of the government in the USA as we have known it so far, till President Trump came into power, essentially we were clear about how the Congress, the Senate, and the executive powers of President is going to function. But we see that President Trump is stretching his executive interpretation of his executive powers beyond what has been normally understood. For example, firing the federal bank governor, which was unheard of really till now. The way people have been removed from the CDC so far, or the way the foreign aid has been reduced or has been made unoperational by President Trump's executive orders. And therefore, what I see is that President Trump is stretching the interpretation of his executive power.
But as far as the Attorney General there is concerned, she is of the opinion that this is actually the judiciary that seems to be overstepping and interfering when it comes to the power and the authority that the President of the United States holds. Thank you very much for the moment. Thank you very much, Mr. Goel, Mr. Sardana, for your expert point of view.